like fully inside of your room instead of a dark background.
I know, it's too bright here. Stupid.
Welcome to Game of Nodes, a weekly podcast on the cosmos from independent validator teams.
Okay, hello and welcome to Game of Nodes, a weekly podcast by independent validators on the cosmos. This week we have Assaf from SCRT with us, and we're going to ask him probably some really basic bitch questions about what he does and what SCRT do, despite the fact that, 3 of the people on this podcast validate SCRT?
2, I think.
Just
probably
2.
two at the moment. Yeah.
You don't, SERP?
I do not.
You don't? Oh, okay, that's my mistake then. So apologies.
He wants to be in the secret game, but he's not there yet.
The next expansion.
Yeah, okay. So apologies in advance for that, Assaf. First off, Noel, we have some. Although I'm guessing actually you don't have the spreadsheet up.
No, I do now.
Okay, so we have some follow-ups. We've had a lot of questions over the last week, and our new format, our continuing changing the format every week so that we don't actually have any kind of regularity dictates that we're now going to do some of the follow-ups from previous weeks right at the top of the show before doing questions at the end. So we have quite a few follow-ups related to what happened with Prop 21 on Juno, but also some questions about what that means for the centralization of validator sets as well.
All right. So I will read through these and you will answer them, other people who aren't me. All right. So you have to understand.
That's one way to get out of answering the questions.
You have to understand that I am so incredibly fucking tired right now that I'm running on I don't know, something that's not energy.
Vegemite?
Sounds like you need more tea.
Why are you so tired?
Because everyone has now everyone's taken to doing upgrades in the middle of the night and podcasts early in the morning. It's 7 a.m. And for some reason, everyone decided to string upgrades together last night. So eventually I just left it up to Cosmovisor.
Don't we all?
Right. So follow-up questions from last week. So the first one we have is, how could it be that 125 validators didn't thoroughly check the code properly?
I can touch on this one a little bit. So there are a handful of us that are on the testnet and are very committed to running on the Juno testnet.
Did anyone hear the question?
Yeah. Can you hear the answer?
You're not hearing us?
No. Is someone talking?
Yeah.
Can I? Am I heard right now?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yeah, I can hear you now.
You're good.
Okay. So from my perspective, there's a handful of us that are really committed to running on the testnet, and we make sure that everything happens correctly on the testnet. And that's kind of what happened here. We had ran I basically did a dry run on the testnet to make sure everything worked as it should. And admittedly, due to a lack of due diligence, I suppose, I didn't confirm that mainnet had the exact same functionality as the testnet. That's basically how it went awry from my perspective.
Yeah. So I think, and also just the context in this question, I think is maybe what we're talking about here. So this is on the basis of Prop 20, where within the upgrade, the aforementioned funds were sent to the incorrect address through just a basic mistake, a pretty complicated mistake, right? In terms of trying to be able to identify or be able to paste in a hex code associated to the right contract address or the right wallet address or something similar to that, right? So I think that's going on. And so the question here is that Prop 21 was to be able to go fix that mistake. And so the idea would be how come 125 validators did not review that code in Prop 20 for that error, right?
Yeah. That context sounds right to me.
Okay,
yeah.
just checking. Frey, you're gonna give an answer for this?
Yeah, well, I think there's also, and then there's also a final. I think Prop 21 is unusual in the sense that there are also developers who had, and we're one of them, who had recused themselves from working on that code for legal and regulatory reasons, and literally, we don't have Git commits against it, haven't reviewed the code. We've helped run testnets and done all the things that were the kind of the normal stuff that we do for Juno. We've helped run testnets. We helped stage and write instructions and coordinate the validator set and whatnot. But insofar as actually working on checking, being responsible for the merging, tagging, and QA on that piece of code, we left it to other people. And so that didn't mean that there were radically fewer eyes on that particular piece of code and that particular handler than there would have been otherwise, but there were fewer. And so things unfortunately got missed I think from the developer end because of, in some cases, just being very tired after the preceding 10 weeks and also just being a bit fast and loose with the actual merge itself, which we've had a talk about how that happened, and we've done a little bit of there's a whole bunch of root cause analysis that will come out on everything from the chain halt to Prop 21. There's a lot to cover because it's been an insane period of time, but that we've already had a discussion about that and what steps we need to take to avoid it in future. But because it's such an unusual situation, it's also very hard to see how we would end up in that situation again, effectively, where there were people who were sort of out of the equation in terms of manpower as well. So that's going to presumably and kind of quite fairly piss off some people who are like, well, you should be looking at this code or nothing. You should either be working on everything or nothing. But, it's easy to say that until you have potentially a regulator breathing down your neck. So that's a kind of important data point, I think, on that one. I think sorry, go on.
I think 21 was pretty unique in that a lot of us didn't want to be working on it just because of other reasons other than the network. So it was left to the people who could work on it. But also keep in mind that it's hex encoded. So it's not only looking at the code, I think there was an assumption that it was the right address. So like, it's not just reading the code, then you have to then extract that and then decode it and then check it, assuming that you know what that address is supposed to be. Like making sure that address is correct is like a bit of a task, and you need to know that the address is what the address is. And maybe I'm not sure if the address was published before.
There were instructions, but they were not well circulated. So that's another thing I think that contributed.
Yeah, so that was probably a falling over in itself, that if there was an intention, I mean, it probably should have been in the proposal to put that address so that people could check.
I think there is actually also one more thing, which is that the hex was used rather than just the BEC32, which is a bit of a weird design decision. But again, like I'm not going to throw stones about it because we literally didn't work on that code. We didn't look at that code. We didn't help review it. And so we can't turn around and say, oh, we wouldn't have designed it that way because, well, we could have chipped in and helped, but we decided not to for the reasons mentioned above. So yeah, it is a bit of a tricky one, I think. And there's no one person or group of people to blame. I think it's a collective failure of Juno in a pretty tough situation. But it does, I think, there are a lot of interesting things here around, like, the val set checking code, right? And this is not just, this is kind of why I thought this was a particularly interesting one, because obviously Stargaze has got some upgrades coming up now, and they have governance controlled smart contracts, right? So, what's the betting that every validator there is check the hex on, the hash of those smart contracts?
Yeah, but also like, it kind of leads into the next question here. Well,
I mean, and we've got Assaf here. So, like, on secret, when you run an upgrade, like, what's your expectation there for your validator set? In terms of checking the code before they run it.
They can't check the code.
Well, it's not closed source. Is it secret?
Why not?
Isn't it? I thought it's all pre-compiled, isn't it?
What is it?
I thought the secret code was all just pre-compiled.
Yeah, it's pre-compiled, but the code is open source.
Oh, is it? Oh, okay. because all the instructions were just downloading the binaries, I think I just assumed that for security reasons, it was closed source.
So correct me if I'm wrong, Assaf, but I believe the reason why we download the binary instead of compiling ourselves is because of SGX. In order to actually compile an SGX binary, it requires having like a certain enclave permissions or Intel permissions that average validators just won't have. And so my understanding is Secret Labs compiles them for us so that not all of us need our own SGX key effectively. That doesn't have to do with the code itself. Is that correct, Assaf? Is that at least in spitting distance?
Yeah. And also the code is open source for security reasons.
Yeah, totally. I just assumed that there must have been some encryption key or something associated with it that would prevent it from being open sourced. But we're still very new. Only entered the set last week. Still very new to Secret. So that's good to know.
Yeah, so welcome. Nice.
Yeah, thank you.
To join, yeah.
So do we want to move on to the next question, which sort of leads into that, in that, is it safe that validators don't have any program experience? I think that should read, is it safe that some validators don't have any programming experience? I think a lot of them do, but perhaps there are also a percentage of people who can't read code or maybe aren't proficient in that type or language. So anyone want to grab onto that one, or want to listen to me ramble for like 10 minutes?
I could touch on that one. I don't think that having program experience necessarily benefits you much really at all. What really benefits you is having, Linux experience, having sysadmin experience with distributed systems. Knowing code only helps insofar as, because you're a software engineer or have software experience, you probably are more acclimated to Linux and other distributions just by virtue of that. But really, that's the only leg up that being a software person gives you when running validators. I don't think there's inherently some magical key that being an engineer or software person gives you in the validator game.
But so back to the previous question, though, if you're expected to check the code, you do need. So I guess there is a sub question within these two questions, which is that, do you need enough technical experience to read the code and to determine what it's going to do to a reasonable satisfaction in order to be a validator? And is that something that foundations and teams should be looking for as a qualification for a validator?
Yeah, I think it's fair to say that, as time goes by, you probably, and when you're recruiting, you should be looking for someone with those kinds of skills in addition to like DevOps. I think in terms of actually running a validator, that, being a bash ninja is probably more important than being able to read the code. But at the same time, there needs to be enough eyes across the validator set that can read code to make sure that we're not injecting malicious code into the validator set. So I think, is it important for every validator to have coders in their team? I don't think so. Is it important that there is a decent amount of coders across the val set? I think it's beneficial if you don't fully, because we shouldn't put our entire trust in the team, because A, they make mistakes, and B, it's crypto. Anyone can be, trying to rug everybody or anything like that. So there definitely should be people checking it, and there definitely should be coders that can check it. But I don't think everyone should be or needs to be.
So then just becomes a question of, how big does your val set need to be statistically to make it likely that one team has definitely checked the code, or two teams or three teams, or whatever your metric is for a reasonable amount of checking, right?
Yeah, and I think this is a thing where it can help that people advertise, their capabilities, and if that's something that they engage in, then people should be supporting them for that work as well. So with delegations, because people have to realize that there's teams out there that are just barely hanging on to a validator so that they can make more money off their other scheme that they're running. That's not the case for all of those types of things, but there's certainly ones out there where they just ape into running a validator code to coincide with their marketing. So if you think that actually running non-malicious code is important, then you should support validators who undertake that work on behalf of the rest of the validator set.
Cool.
Yeah. And Assaf, go back to that question that I think we glossed over a little bit, but Assaf, on secret, like when you guys are producing, builds, or you're producing, tags for releases, what is your expectation in terms of what is your expectations from testing or from validation or from quality control from the validator set? Or who do you look to for those types of roles?
Yeah, so up until recently, no one, I think, really looked at the actual code from the validator set. And I think it's a pretty new movement that validators also develop the code and test the code themselves, in a deep manner, and not just running it on testnets and stuff.
Right.
So hard to tell right now, yeah.
Well, that's it, isn't it? Because a lot of times people will be able to just do that and get away with it because there's been no consequences. So it's interesting to see a time when there have been consequences because people haven't checked the code. I think when we had Shane and Sisler on here, we also talked about there was a early Stargaze testnet where they snuck something into a upgrade handler, and it said if you've read this code, contact the team.
Right.
And then it was one person out of 50 or something actually looked in the code and was just like, oh, hang on a minute. What's this?
That's pretty good.
So, yeah. Maybe, like you say, maybe that's the thing that wasn't really expected in the past, but is expected now for the purposes of decentralization. I don't know.
Yeah. So for Secret, for example, we've been running for 2 years now. And at first, the validator set was only DevOps guys. And then teams that are building on Secret started to join the validator set to raise money that way.
Mm-hmm. Right.
But they were building their own project on top of Secret and not building the protocol itself. So I don't think that they are looking closely at our code.
Yeah. So I think that covers all of our follow-ups. So we have a topic of the week. As people have probably guessed from our choice of guest, it's secret. And obviously, first of all, we have a big thank you to Assaf for being the one who bottomed out the root cause on the Juno chain halt. You may remember him from such Cosmos incidents as the Juno chain halt, where he came through as a bit of a hero of the whole episode. But so I'll kick off here because I've noticed the first question on our list is the explain like I'm 5, and I do that role pretty well because I am genuinely pretty clueless about the benefits of secret. So, can you imagine I'm a newcomer to the Cosmos ecosystem, be that a user or maybe a developer? What are the primary benefits of secret as compared to, say, before today, maybe Terra? Or I suppose, equally Juno has Cosmosm, but the use case I think for Juno and Secret is very different. So maybe Terra is a fairer comparison. I don't know. So explain like I'm 5. What is the big draw for Secret for developers and for users?
Yeah, so Secret Network is a Cosmos-based chain with permissionless Cosmosm. With the only difference of having private inputs, outputs, and state for contracts. So you can build pretty cool stuff like private DAOs with private voting, private governance. And for example, DAOs can store private keys in their contract state and then sign transactions on other blockchains. Or validate blocks on other chains, for example. And you can store, for example, private entropy in contracts and then generate random numbers on the fly. So it's very good for games. For example, you can generate like random mazes and shuffle like a deck of cards, something that you can't do anywhere else because you just see the entire deck on chain.
Right, so you could do like a generative NFTs or something like that without needing an oracle or some other source of randomness.
Yeah. And
wait a minute, storing entropy? How does that work? Can you explain that just a little bit more to me?
Yeah, so for example, let's say that you want to shuffle a deck of cards for poker, okay? So you have, let's say, two players join to the table, and each player, when they join, they input a secret number. They can do that because inputs to contracts are encrypted, the input parameters, the variables. So the contract receives two secret numbers from two players, and then it can use that with a pseudo-random number generator to generate a random number, and for example, to shuffle a deck of cards, and then give cards to the players, for example.
Yeah. So, yeah, I'm a little confused about where the entropy comes from originally, like to be stored in the first place. So you say it's secret, but it has to be generated initially, right?
Yeah. So everything happens on chain. Everything that happens on chain must reach consensus. So you can't just generate a random number from like nowhere. I don't know, from the nodes themselves. You have to input the entropy from users inside transactions. So
okay, cool.
If, for example, two players join in and each of them input a private like secret number or something like that, and assuming at least one of them is honest, then you can take both numbers and hash them together, and then none of them knows the output of the hash.
Yeah, so the benefit of secret being that neither party can see what's in there. It's like the black box. Which is another cool application of secret, which is kind of on topic. Is it black box cache? Is that what it's called?
Yeah, that sounds right.
Yeah, that was a pretty cool project that I used the other day. It was not clear to me initially how the hell it was operated, but after about half an hour, I asked someone, and then it was pretty good. Yeah, it's nice to if you need to seed new wallets anonymously or anything, it's like a good little application for that, and entirely wouldn't be possible if secret didn't exist. There's no other way that you can anonymize a wallet anywhere else in the cosmos that I know of like that.
Well, I guess you could do it with snarks, right? But it's the approach is different on secrets, right? It's not using ZK snarks or Circom or something like that. It's using
but are there snarks in the cosmos at the moment?
Well, I mean, there is supposedly a Tornado Cache clone coming to Juno at some point, but there's no reason why you can't compile Circom circuits, and then it's just requires quite a bit of fiddling to actually wrangle them into a smart contract layer, basically. I won't pretend that I'm fully up to speed on the details of how that actually works. I just know that you can do it. You can compile the circuits. There are Rust libraries for doing it. And obviously then you can actually interpret what is happening to say that input does actually match output. Thus the two did happen. Thus you can release funds or take some further action or whatever. But I suppose my question would be like the approach that Secret uses for like, you know, sort of the built-in security of the smart contract layer and where it fits users presumably doesn't require lots of extra developer effort. Is that like because obviously ZK Snarks is it's a lot of overhead if you want to actually work with them, right?
Yeah, so for Secret, it's just like as a developer, as a contract developer, it's just like a version of CosmWasm with just a few tweaks. Also, it's a bit of an outdated version of CosmWasm because we are running it since like September of 2020. But as a developer, you don't need to do anything special. You just need to take into considerations the privacy model of your contract. So what you wanna keep private and what you wanna expose via queries, and whether you wanna implement like an access control mechanism in your contract, and stuff like that. For example, CW20 contract on Secret, we call it SNP20 contract, is a privacy token because balances are private, and when you transfer a token, the recipient is private too. By default, unless you expose the details via query.
Right. And how is practically speaking, how is that encryption at rest kind of done? Like again, explain like I'm 5. I'm not a crypto expert by any means.
Yeah, so we're using something that's called the SGX, which is a hardware chip inside like every Intel CPU today. And what it does, it allows you to run computations on encrypted data. And we require every validator, every node on the network to have an updated SGX hardware. And it means that they are running computations like CosmWasm computations without seeing the actual data that they are running. But the output is also encrypted, but they reach consensus on it because it's exactly the same for each of them. Because the computation is deterministic.
So there's 2 layers to it. There's encryption at effectively the programming layer, where you're essentially building in developer tooling that says, use this API, your inputs will be encrypted, they'll be decrypted at the output, don't worry about it, just use the API. Yeah. And then there's also the hardware, which is ensuring that node operators effectively can't be inspecting that data as it's in flight or as it's at rest, right?
Yeah. Yeah, so outside of consensus, the users encrypt and decrypt the inputs and outputs. But obviously we do that for them with the CLI and with the JavaScript and Python libraries.
Right. Okay, cool. So yeah, it's a combination of the hardware and like thinking about the developer, like the holistic developer experience and stuff. That's cool. Because I've seen some of the, again, like from talking to other CosmWasm teams or interacting with other people who are using CosmWasm, I've seen some of the secret tooling around like essentially developer tooling and bootstrapping and whatnot, and it's all pretty slick and joined up. So I kind of had guessed that you guys had spent a reasonable amount of time sort of focusing on that side of things and the ergonomics of it. So that kind of does make sense. So what is it like working on the core team and stuff? Like, what's your involvement? What's your speciality like there? What's the thing that you kind of work on the most?
So we are like a pretty small team. We were 4 engineers up until recently, and now we are on board in 4 more. So we all did everything. We built like since like February of 2020, I think, we started to work with the CosmWasm team. to bring CosmWasm to a state where it's production ready. And pretty early on, we discovered that we need to rewrite the entire core of CosmWasm to work inside SGX. So we kept the APIs of CosmWasm, but rewrote everything inside. And all along the way, we shared feedback and code with the Configure team, with Ethan and Simon. Then back in, I think, September of 2020, we upgraded mainnet with the version of secret contracts, we call it, the CosmWasm inside SGX. And I think all of 2021, we worked on like building blocks for contracts. So the CW20 equivalent, which is SNP20 token, and then SNP 721, which are private NFTs, which have public and private metadata. We also build an AMM and bridges to Ethereum and Binance Smart Chain. So yeah, because we were just 4 people, we worked on everything together. So
nice. And what's your background as an engineer? Like before Secret, what did you do? Are you like mainly a kind of low level protocol guy, or you're going to tell me you sort of worked on mobile apps before this or something, or did advertising bots or something completely different? Graphic design.
Secret, I was in the Israeli military for 6 years. I was doing cybersecurity work, like mostly defending against nation state actors, and mostly building the infrastructure of the team that's supposed to research malware. Sorry, my toddler is waking up. Just a second.
Do you need to go for a second?
Yeah, maybe.
We can wait, mate. We'll talk amongst ourselves.
Thank you.
No worries.
Those days. I remember those days.
Well, I guess we should wait before continuing the secret conversation. But how about that UST back to 70 cents? Luna hovering around $1.
We have on the sheet UST. I was about to say in all caps, but then obviously it's an acronym, so it would be in all caps anyway. But it does have a lot of exclamation marks after it.
Yeah, and it's just like scattered around the sheet everywhere. And it's like, links to Duma YouTube videos and just UST and Scribble across this spreadsheet. How did it come like this?
Yeah. Well, Luna looks
so far in 3 days.
Luna looks like it's at $1.03 at the moment.
Yeah, it seems to be. I imagine that is how the UST is making a very slow recovery. I guess whoever was trying to push the UST into the dirt ran out of powder.
Yeah, something like that.
Or maybe the goal was to just buy some cheap Luna.
I mean, do you buy the conspiracy theory that it's somebody trying to make money on shorting it or whatever?
Do I buy that? No. I think the legs it's had an incredible pump in the last, preceding months. I think maybe it just ran out of steam and then it had a hiccup. And then, do you remember the Iron Finance fiasco last year?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
it's outside of the cosmos, so you guys might not be familiar with it, but
no idea. It's outside
knows,
the cosmos. I've got no clue. Obviously, I don't own or hold any crypto outside of cosmos, and the idea that I would is completely ridiculous.
So basically, I mean, it's gone back a bit now, but I think it did get a mild attack on it, and it busted its peg and lost confidence immediately. Mm-hmm. But it was an algo stablecoin. And it went to it was pumped by one of those football guys, right? Or maybe one of those Schultz, was it a football guy or was it like one of those shark guys or something like that?
I don't remember. I just remember it was some external personality.
Yeah, so some dude was pumping it and then it had a hiccup and went to zero incredibly fast. So it was a mint. I think there was too much lag in like the mint algorithm, which was meant to, increase the price of one. I can't remember exactly how it worked, but I think it's similar to how UST works, but different. But it had a bad oracle, and there was too much lag in it. And if you attacked it quick enough with a flash loan, you could send it to zero. Apparently, it just lost confidence, and everyone bailed on it. So
yeah, well, isn't it more? And obviously, like, there is a piece of price action that changes that initiates the attack, but isn't the fundamental issue that as soon as a algorithmic stable depegs enough, that people just fundamentally lose confidence, and that's just like a bank run, effectively?
I don't know if that's fair though, because if you look at the charts, like almost every stablecoin has depegged at some point. Mm-hmm. Like Tether went down to like 60 cents at some point, right? And so
because there's no algorithm keeping them pegged on Binance and Kraken and, DEXs, they have their mechanism where people can arb to. But if there's no arbs or if there's not enough liquidity in the pools where they're being smashed, they'll go down anyway. So It all sort of relies on being able to make arbs back to the original algorithm that actually stabilizes it. And for all of those places where it's traded to have enough liquidity to be able to sustain a prolonged attack on it. So I think that, even though there was UST as high as it was, still not deep enough liquidity to defend against something like that. And I think the same thing could happen with, Tether and BUSD and the rest of them. It's just that, people are of the belief that they're backed 1-to-1, so they will arb between pools, not necessarily back to the, the algorithmic pool, which actually keeps the peg. So I think there's something to be said for the belief in a system as well, that will keep people. So, because people believe that, and it might be, Tether is backed 1-to-1 with the US dollar, then if between Kraken and Binance there's a difference, they'll arbitrage it to, bring the peg back. But if there's a system which doesn't have 100% confidence, like, UST seems to have shown, once you break the peg, if there's not enough arbitrage back to get it back to $1 quickly, people can lose confidence and then just start bailing out of it, and then you get an avalanche of volume. So you need really deep liquidity to absorb it, and a lot of arbiters. And when you then can't access back to the original pegging pool, as was the case because the bridges were clogged, then that causes another problem. So yeah.
If I can reduce a very complicated situation down to like a literal 5-second meme, do we think peg is going to be regained?
I think so. I think the longer you leave it, it'll just regain from the algo.
Usurper?
Yeah, I think UST will regain.
She'll see.
I think it will as well. I do question. I mean, one of the big points of faith behind it was the fact that Luna was above UST in market cap, right?
Right.
I'm starting to wonder if maybe it was a wrong decision for it to be tied 1-to-1. So if you look at Silk and Shade, which are on Secret Network, so it's a little appropriate. They're looking at actually having like a different system for, it's still going to be like an algorithmic stablecoin, but the peg isn't going to be just to their shade derivative, which would be like Luna. It would be, let's say you can swap secret for the UST as well. And so if you try in multiple different cryptocurrencies, one dropping doesn't necessarily undo the system, right? And so I'm wondering to what extent that's true. The fact that they're recovering the peg right now and there's such a discrepancy between the two.
But if they're all positively correlated with one another, then one dropping does bring them all down. So you're back in the same,
It's true. But
so
it reduces the pool.
But the reason that central banks do this with credit issuance, and they do it with, historically they did it with gold or dollars or whatever. They actually held the money somewhere because they knew that there was a fundamental difference between the two types of things. Like one of them is essentially it's real. It's real. It can be used as an actual store of value. So like there's, I guess, to bail out 2008 or to bail out during wartime, long-term government bonds, long-term government loans are also used. So there's like a variety of different tools in the toolbox, which are all about, increasing liquidity, right? But not all of those things are positively correlated with one another, right? So it means you have different tools available to you. So I guess that's the question. I'm kind of wondering whether a algorithmic stable doesn't yet have all of the tools it would need to actually grab something out of thin air that's not positively correlated, right? Because that's also the problem with Luna here. Is as soon as you lose confidence in UST, you lose some confidence in Luna, and Luna is trying to dig UST out of the hole, right?
Yeah, I think Luna's taken the brunt of it, for sure.
So, I mean, Assaf, do you think UST is going to regain its peg?
Yes.
Okay, so we're 5 for 5 on the call. So there you go. I mean, this is not investment advice, but 5 out of 5 members of the Game of Nodes podcast tonight think UST is going to regain its peg given time.
Well, now let's throw a little bit of a hardball in there, right? So Osmosis just put out their update, right? And they're considering hard forking so that people can pull out their UST and their Luna pools. So there's going to be a governance prop going on for that now. If suddenly another 300 or 400 million enters the market, what happens then? I mean, that's going to make it more difficult.
Explain that again, Schulte. What are they putting a proposal for?
Yeah, so put up a proposal to fork Osmosis such that they all the pools, all the bondings within their UST Osmo, Luna Osmo, and one other pool become unbonded, so people can immediately pull them out and sell them if they want to. Right now, you're tied into your 1 day, 7 day, 14 day bonding, and they want to undo that. So
what you're saying is Luna price is going to go down even more.
I'm saying it's a possibility. So it's actually pretty interesting. I think I'm against them doing that. Like, we took the risk in bonding. But basically the idea is they're trying to get all the voters in on it and voting. If it hits 66%, they're just going to cut it early and hard fork Osmosis with all the tokens unbonded.
Is that something that's come from the team, or is that something that's come from users?
Oh no, that's come from the team. I'll post I guess I can't here. I'll send it to the Discord, and then you guys can post it in the YouTube chat so you can read up about it.
Yeah, I mean, I think essentially the damage is done there. All that can really happen now is that UST can slowly regain its peg. Luna's done in terms of price for the time being. So, I don't see the point now. I mean, unless Luna's going to zero. But what do you think of stuff?
I think they can probably land in the top 50 on CoinMarketCap after regaining the peg, so not a bad spot to land on, I think.
Do you think Luna will have a substantial recovery, or you think we're going to see it pretty low for a long time? I think the confidence is pretty busted in Terra at the moment.
I don't know. It's purely speculation at this point, but after looking at their code, their market code, and seeing that they're willing to sacrifice Luna for regaining the peg. So I think that Luna eventually will bounce back. Like, I don't know if like in a week or in a year, but I think that it has a good chance.
So I don't think, the turmoil over the last couple of days doesn't change the fact that Terra have a good product and good marketing. And
good developers. They have, I think within the Cosmos, they have the most developers. And I mean, that can't be understated how important that is.
Sorry, I'm just reading comments.
Yeah, just because, I mean, well, I think Assaf was saying earlier, right? You guys are 4 and you've just added 4 more developers, right? So, like, to give an idea, like for the listeners, 8 developers would be quite typical for a very small startup, maybe a couple of $100,000 annual recurring revenue, something like that, that's just received a Series A or like a very, very first seed round or something like that, a few $1 million, a couple of $1 million from a few investors to see if the product has legs. Typically, then you would go from like 2 to 4 developers to 6 to 8 developers, something like that. So eight developers is a small but decent, smart startup team. Right, and Secret is quite a bit bigger and a more substantial a product than like an early stage startup. So, I obviously, I mean, Assaf, correct me if I'm wrong. I don't know if that's because it's hard to hire or if that's because of it's difficult to bring new people on and not be unproductive. I don't know what's been the reason that you've scaled in that way.
So it's hard to hire. And I'm not sure if you're familiar with the Secret history. Like, it started as Enigma, and they did an ICO back in 2017. And they raised like 45 million. And then, like, when I joined back in 2019, they were building a layer 2 privacy solution for Ethereum, and it was not going that well. So they decided to start fresh on Cosmos, and they also had like I think they had like 10 or 15 developers, and they decided to scale back because it wasn't working for them.
Right. So, okay, that makes a bit more sense in terms of developer size, but this, I guess, bringing us back to like why it's important that Terra has so many developers, right? Is that most of the other teams in the Cosmos are operating on probably a similar number of devs to what Secret were before the scale up that Assaf says they're just doing at the moment, right? Which is 3 or 4 engineers who are practically, doing the day to day. I think Stargaze is about 4. Most of the other teams I can think of are between 4 and maybe 10 if they have a lot of people, and given the market cap of a lot of the chains in Cosmos, I know obviously Cosmos is a lot smaller than some other ecosystems, but those are very small numbers for team sizes given the scale of these companies. If they were traditional companies, they would have 100 engineers, but so yeah.
Speaking of Terra, are you guys familiar with Mental Mint?
I'm not familiar with it.
With what, sorry?
A Mental Mint.
No.
So Mental Mint is a special node that Terra developed. It's essentially a node without Tendermint. It syncs state, and they replaced the entire Tendermint stack with a much faster DB database engine. And I was talking with one of their engineers like a few hours before shit hit the fence. Yeah. And he was saying that they're serving constantly like 1.4 million requests per hour for Terra. Yeah. So
do you think that other projects should try and pick that up or try and include something like that into the SDK?
Yeah, so I was talking with him like about trying to port this to secret, and he said that it will help. That he will help like a week after they.
So
yeah.
can you tell me the reason that, for example, when you jump onto MintScan and go to the secret page, there's a delay in loading it. Is that something to do with secret itself, or is that a MintScan thing?
Probably a MintScan thing. Like.
Yeah, okay. I know it only seems to be on secret, just talking about RPCs and stuff. So this is like a kind of light node that you're talking about with all the tender mint stripped out, all the consensus stuff stripped out. It's basically just does it still check hashes against the validator set?
Yeah, it's still like receiving state and validating the headers, but it doesn't run transactions in blocks. It just like syncs the state, and then you can query it really fast. And I think that he was saying he said that they have a cluster of 35 nodes, and they serve like 20K queries per second.
Wow, that is decent.
Yeah.
Is that what kind of load balancer? Did they get into that type of discussion with you as well? No. Because I know that I think Stargaze is now using and Usurper might be able to help out with this. I think they're using the Cloudflare Smart load balancer now. Is that right?
Yeah, we have. We use regional kind of setups that are both pruned as well as like full nodes across a couple different regions, and then Cloudflare bounces based off of geography and other types of things. Yeah.
So if you have pruned nodes along with full nodes behind a load balancer, how does it figure out where to send the requests? Is that programmable or?
It doesn't.
So it just throws them around until it gets the one that.
Sort of, but we're not. I think the goal is not so much around being able to provide archive nodes to a community. It's really more that I think with so many validators running prune nodes now, that the chain is obviously wants to make sure that there's plenty of archives, right? So there's such a race on the validator side to bring it down and to to make sure that we have short block times and things like that. That like there's some concerns that how many archive nodes are out there. So for Stargaze, I think they have a couple. I think there's like 4 or 5 that the team runs that are out there. Then we take backups and all that kind of stuff too.
Yeah, I think that's sort of getting lost in the soup. The fact that one of the jobs of a validator is to maintain
keep the history.
Yep. Yeah. So I
think
know almost everyone's running a pruned setup because otherwise it's a way to help making sure that you sign all the blocks and that type of stuff. But
for sure,
definitely in your infrastructure stack, you should be, keeping history as well if at all possible. So I know that like we're working on having, hosted hardware elsewhere to make it cheaper for us to be able to keep a lot of state on like slower drives and stuff. It wouldn't be able to keep up with validating, but it'll be good enough to put lower cost drives, just fill it up with the data forever. Sitting in a colo somewhere where it doesn't matter if it goes offline, just like cheaper setup on your own hardware, just so that people can sync from it if they need to someday. So.
Yeah, I think it's becoming more important, and I think also Chains are trying to figure out a way to incentivize that as well, because there's so many valuable kind of roles for validators to play from RPC and API nodes as well as archive and other types of things, and there's not really a clear incentive structure around that. At least from a not on chain at least, right? Everything else becomes off chain, which becomes more difficult to track and everything else. So, but yeah, it's important, I think.
It is important, and it is a huge problem that in proof of stake, it's not incentivized by the chain and somehow natively, like,
right.
The fact that, it's a shame that there's not a, easy way to make sure that the people who are contributing to the health of the network get the delegations instead of, people who have the best marketing or something like that.
That is a totally different topic.
Yeah. I mean, but it sort of ties in that we can all go to the effort to, ensure the health of the chain, and as is our responsibility. Doesn't necessarily mean that you get rewarded for it. So it's good to see that Stargaze are working in that direction.
Yeah, for sure.
This is also something we talked about in a previous episode. I can't remember if it was the one with actually with Shane or whether it's a different one, but where it's all about incentives. And I think the way incentives have been designed in Cosmos for a variety of things were effectively a good first attempt and need to be upgraded. Like governance is a prime example of it's a first stab at governance and it doesn't work. Sorry, doesn't. It's done fine up to now, and it's now at the point where it's creaking and it's breaking because 10x users, everything breaks, right? And another thing is like the economic incentives around the validator set in distributed proof of stake do not scale for the long-term health of the network. I think, and I think it's something that we seem to come back to quite often on this. We seem to come back to that topic in one shape or another quite often. And I think that's also something that we found very interesting. I saw there was a comment about a cache down a minute ago. And I think it's also something that came out with, although, I was in a bit of a delirium of sleep deprivation, thanks to the hospital and whatnot last week. But that came out with our conversation with Greg is like, there are a bunch of ways that you can start to devise more interesting incentive mechanisms using the code inherent in a blockchain and then go to a different chain that has an infrastructure provider and do things based on those incentives, right? And there's other ways we can cut this. Right. But to bring it back to our guest, who I realize is actually that way, is we were just talking about query speed ups, and we were talking about the speed up stuff that Terra have been doing. I gather there's been a substantial query speed increase on Secret. Is that something that you guys have done just for Secret, or is that something that can be applied to any Cosmos chain?
I'm sorry, what are you talking? What are you referring?
This is actually Schultz's question, so perhaps he can take that one.
Yes, the question is about the 500x speed increase for query nodes. I guess what's the root cause of that? Is that Secret specific? Is it just from adding threading? Can it be translated to Juno and to Terra? What kind of cross-pollination can happen with that?
So actually, I think Juno already have this feature. We backported some API from some newer APIs from Cosmos version 1. The crypto APIs for verifying signatures, like cryptographic signatures. Because on Secret, we're doing a lot of cryptographic operations inside of Secret contracts for access control purposes. For example, when you query a SNP20 token for your balance, it's private, so you have to prove to the contract that you are the owner of the account. So the way that you do that is by signing something off chain and then sending it to the contract to verify. And inside the contract, it verifies the signature, which is a very expensive thing to do inside of Cosmos. So what we did is we added an API for contracts to offload that computation to the chain itself instead of doing it inside the contract. So right now it's much it should be much faster.
So this is something that came about. It can't be translated, is what you're saying, because it is effectively a reuse of something that already exists and was created previously. Is that right?
Yeah, it already exists with newer versions of CosmWasm, but I'm not sure if the use case translates to Juno, for example, because you don't have to implement the access control mechanism to access your data. But for example, to verify blocks inside of contracts, that is something that can be translated to Juno. For example, if you would write a contract that is essentially a permissionless bridge, for example, to just like IBC that needs to verify blocks on other blockchains, then that contract would need to do a lot of cryptographic computations, which in CosmWasm version 1, you already have that. We didn't have that because we're running with CosmWasm 0.10, which was released back in September of 2020.
Got it. That makes a lot of sense.
Cool. I think we've got one more question for you, Assaf, which is kind of a big picture stuff. Next 5 years, what's like the vision for how Secret's going to grow and change, and like how the use of it also might evolve over that time? Like, where do you see the network going, in like on a 5-year horizon? Like, if you guys even plan that far ahead?
Yeah. So hopefully by then we will not have to rely on SGX or any other hardware solution.
Yeah.
Because it's very expensive to run a node right now compared to other chains. And B, it's a vendor lock-in, which makes us dependent on Intel right now. I guess with Secret, there are a lot of use cases that you can't do anywhere else on blockchain. For example, build games with incomplete information, or build DAOs with private voting, which I think is very important. So hopefully we will see a lot of novel blockchain applications built on Secret, but like hard for me to imagine right now what these use cases will be.
What are you most excited for that's kind of coming up on the Secret roadmap?
In terms of apps or on infrastructure?
Either, both.
Yeah, both.
Yeah, so I'm building the infrastructure, so I'm excited about bringing the newer version of CosmWasm to Secret, like having IBC contracts. Then I would want to see apps built on Secret. Like, I think games have a lot of potential on Secrets because of the privacy aspect. And private voting, which I already mentioned a couple of times. So hopefully we will see a bunch of them this year, maybe in the next 6 months.
So private voting, something you're working on, is it?
It's something that's already exists, like the CFI DAO. They have private voting, I think, for over more than.
So you plan to implement that on Secret so that validators can, or anyone can vote on governance proposals with anonymity?
That's something that we're also discussing, but maybe farther ahead.
Because I think that's I'm probably going to crucify myself here. I think that's important because a validator doesn't necessarily, what's best for the network isn't necessarily always the popular vote.
I completely agree. Yeah.
Yeah, and when you couple that with public forums like Twitter, people's businesses just get ravaged when they, and a lot of times you can't make the right decision. You're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. And I think, a lot of countries have anonymous voting, like I know Australia does, so you can't be like discriminated against for your vote preference.
Right.
And I think like in terms of proof of stake, a validator's preferences, like I already said, aren't always aligned with the community because, community tends to be more emotionally driven in a lot of instances, whereas a validator, has in a lot of cases a set of values that they apply to blockchain, or they're, whether they're blockchain purists or just want to do what's best for the blockchain. Doesn't always align. And I think to be able to have the ability to, vote anonymously is important, actually.
I also think even during the vote, like away from even that, even to see somewhat results posted as the vote is going, I think completely sways people in terms of how they're going to vote. So getting a proposal that's open, and if you have a huge amount of people that vote one way, to turn that tide, I think is really difficult unless you have obviously validators who are looking at maybe a little bit deeper than maybe the community. But I think from a community perspective, if they see 97% voting positive, even if it's only 2% of quorum, guess what? A lot of people look at it, yeah, that's what I should be doing, right? So that's also
absolutely.
I think is a real benefit here. Even if post vote those results are public, I think that still gives it some options in there.
Yep, absolutely.
So I mean, like most democracies for a very, very long time have had private ballots, and that's been traditionally, I think, to avoid the coercion of the upper class. Your employer, saying, tapping you on the shoulder and saying this is how you should vote. And that's before you even get into the inherent problems of the tyranny of the majority and whatnot, which I think you just identified, usurper, which is that if you see that a certain number of people have voted a certain way, it makes it more difficult to form some kind of an objective view. I mean, none of us vote objectively, right? That's a complete fallacy anyway. But
I think it's weird that even in situations like that, you don't want to be on the losing side, which, like, even for votes that don't directly affect you or anything else, like, people don't want to vote the loser. So it's that type of thing, I think, is a huge thing.
So case in point, we got asked a couple of times, what we think of Prop 22, right? And that's an example of one where it is overwhelmingly positive,
right?
But what do we think of that prop, and how are we voting? Because I mean, from our point of view, we think it's probably not economically viable with the market downturn that we're now seeing for those final 10 validators to actually break even. But it's like 90 something % positive. And it's like, well, I want to die on a hill of validator set expansion? No, I've done enough dying on a hill the last 10 weeks over the CCN drama. I'm done with that,
Well, and those that do have the dissenting opinion during a vote, they are expected to put a message on why they have a dissenting opinion. And so it becomes, you have to put so much more energy in to not go with the crowd. Look at Cosmos Hub Prop 69 with adding CosmWasm to the hub. I had to flood a lot of questions and put out a statement about why I voted yes on it, because everyone else was voting no. And so that dissenting opinion, it shouldn't matter until the die is cast. Right.
Yeah. And I think the overall fallacy of increasing validator sets equals decentralization, I think, is a different topic that we should talk about also. Because I think going from 125 to 135 does absolutely F all for decentralization. But that's a different topic.
We're going from 125 to 225 does the same thing.
Exactly the same. It's literally the same amount of decentralization. So speaking of decentralization, Assaf, I know Secret keeps the validator set pretty small. Like, I think you guys just went to 80, right? It was at 70 or it started at 50. I don't know the history here. But why have you guys kept that tight?
I don't know. Like, I'm not involved in this part. Maybe Schultz will know more about this than me.
Yeah, I can throw a lot of heat in that direction. I was probably the cardinal dissenting opinion about expanding the set recently. So the cardinal reason was when the network is under load, you start to see a lot of like pairing off of missed blocks. And the reason why I dissented from increasing was because we don't know the root cause yet. There was a bunch of work that Chill Validation and I did, kind of doing A/B testing on for all these different things, peering, different hardware types, different locations, all sorts of stuff. And we never, like, all these different things we were changing, we like made incremental improvements, but we had no good final solution of this. This was the cause. And because we haven't had a big load event since us having done this testing, I was resistant to the set actually being increased until then. Because during, I think it was during the shade event a couple months ago, block times, I think we're approaching 10 minutes. And that doesn't seem huge. And yeah, increasing the set by 10 won't change that too much, but it's still that much more risk.
10 seconds.
No. It hit 10 minutes per block.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
That's insane. I didn't realize it was.
I didn't realize that either.
Yeah. Now, I mean, and it was for like a full day or two that it slowed down to that point.
Wow.
And so there was a lot of effort that went into trying to figure out what the cause was, right?
Yeah, sure.
But I mean, maybe because all the effort that we put into resolving the issues is why there hasn't been a huge event like that since, because there have been multiple NFT events since then and things like that. But still.
But do you think that the block stretch was because of bad pairing? Like because of the size of the validator set?
Yeah, so it seemed like one of the core issues was when the blocks started going down, because they would take so long, there became like consensus hubs. You would see them rotating who was actually getting consensus.
Yeah.
And I think that was the biggest issue. And then hardware improvements or like hardware optimization was the next big answer.
Do you think like I know is Assaf, how much overhead is there in the encryption? Because yesterday I switched over, like I'm running bare metal, like decent hardware, and I switched over to Cosmo Visor, right? So I left. I switched over to Cosmo Visor and a remote signer for Secret, and I had just the hardest time catching back up to the head. So I initially switched over to the remote signer and kept the just running the daemon normally, and I was able to catch up, but it was slow. And then I switched over to Cosmo Visor. I missed far fewer blocks when I switched over to Cosmo Visor, but it took. I couldn't catch the head by the time there was the upgrade, and that was probably a good few hundred blocks out. Is there like lots of overhead in the encryption that makes bringing the blocks in slow? And should that matter when you're just trying to sync state? Or is there like some other issue that makes syncing slow? Because I know that I wasn't the only one who had that problem yesterday.
Yeah, so there's of course overhead with the encryption and with running inside of SGX because it's running on encrypted memory. I'm not sure of the recent figures, but I think the bigger overhead is with our WebAssembly engine. So Cosmwasm are using a WebAssembly engine that's called Wasmer. And back in 2020, it was not compatible with SGX, so we went with a WebAssembly engine that's called Wasmi, which is a lot more slower, like 200, maybe 300 times slower than what's currently in Cosmwasm. We were just trying to implement like secret contracts, making contracts run in SGX. So right now our WASM engine is far slower than than the vanilla WASM engine. And for example, with what Shade were doing, they were doing a cross-chain airdrop. And they were doing a cross-chain airdrop with Secret, the Hub, and the Atom and Luna. And because each of the chain has a different coin types, then you can just like convert between addresses. The same seed would produce different addresses on Secret, on Terra, and on the Hub. So what they had to do is have if you want to claim the Shade airdrop from your Terra address, you have to sign a proof that you own the Terra address and send it to the Shade contract. And then the Shade contract had to do some heavy cryptographic computations to verify it. And when a lot of people were claiming a lot of Shade at the same time, it made like blocks stretch to be like 10 minutes.
So is there any light at the end of that tunnel? Is there any plan to move to a different WebAssembly engine, or is there development in the WASMA that maybe will allow use with SGX later on? Or
yeah, so since then WASMA completely rewrote their code base. And now that we're finished with the upgrade that was like a few hours ago, we're going to start working on migrating our WASM engine to be just like what Cosm WASM are using right now, which should be 200 to 300x faster.
That's a pretty big speed up.
Yeah.
So did you say, sorry, I was just reading comments. Did you say that what was going to produce that 200 to 300 times speed up?
Switching to WASMA.
So they are switching to WASMA. So there is like SGX available on that now, or you guys are going to do that work?
Well, we're going to do that work. And like I said, they completely rewrote the entire WASMA code base, like in the past year. And it should be compatible with SGX now.
Awesome. That's great news.
Yeah.
We just had a message from Usurper saying they've just had a power cut. So that's why he suddenly has disappeared from the call. I've got just double checking what we've got through all our questions here. So we've talked about increasing the val set. The other question I think that this is kind of interesting from the perspective of we've already talked about secret voting, which is that does it make validators uncomfortable when the community asks them for reasons on the way they vote on proposals? And I think Schultz made an interesting point on this one already when he said that, generally speaking, I think people generally only ask you to justify your position if you are offering a dissenting view, which, I mean, I guess makes sense, right?
I can maybe add input on this. We had a couple of projects building staking derivatives on Secret, which will make your staking private, and the contract will stake the secret for you. They also implemented private voting inside the contract to let your validator know what you want to vote. Or to let the contract vote with the voting power, what's in the direction that the stakers are wanting to vote.
So that sounds like almost like a contract version of like auth-z or that kind of functionality, except secret, obviously.
Yeah, sort of like it's a contract that stakes the secret for you privately, And then you can, for each governance on-chain proposal, you can vote in the contract what the contract should vote on with the main governance module.
Right. That's really cool. I didn't know that existed on Secret. Learning a lot tonight. So I think we've trying to keep it to 90 minutes. I think now is our optimistic goal because we like to chat too much to our guests. So we've got one last question. We've got a wrap up question, which is what are you most excited about this week in the Cosmos? Schultzy, do you want to kick off first? Because you're usually the most positive and least tired sounding out of all of us.
Yeah, I mean, I could go first. Let's see. I can't tell you how excited I am for the improvements from Shockwave. I know I've been saying Shockwave upgraded for the last couple of weeks, but Secret Network's like my home network. So anytime I see an improvement there, I'm like, yes. So I guess there's that for now. I'm also hopeful about UST coming back up. I think that within a week it's going to be back up. I've got some strong hopium though. Like I have that just a direct injection into my veins. So don't listen to me, but I think it'll be back up. I think that by that time the market is going to recover, not recover like stably, but I think that it's going to at least level out. There's going to be less FUD. People are going to be more happy to be here again.
I think you're right about I think UST will definitely repeg. I think it will have probably more volatility going forward though, because of thinner pulls and less backing. But I definitely think it'll repeg. I know we didn't sell anything of our UST that we still had when it started to depeg. We had fortunately, from a risk perspective, actually sold almost all of our UST just the day before this whole thing kicked off. So we were lucky in that regard. But that was basically just we do like a bit of a risk mitigation rebase every couple of weeks just to see where our assets are sitting and what the risk of that is to our business. So in my case, it's better to move our risk over into our fiat and let our government have a chance to bugger it up for us instead of a non. So, yeah. But actually, my thing, we have released our King airdrop, so that's nice. We have been waiting for Juno tools all this time, and I'm pretty excited about its release. It was incredibly easy to use and super smooth. So congratulations to the team who built that. And yeah, so that's my thing that I'm pretty happy about. If anyone wants to do an airdrop, recommend using Juno tools with the Merkle route. It's cheap on gas. It's very easy to use. You can put tens of thousands of addresses into it. So it's very good.
Nice.
Yeah.
Assaf, what are you most excited about in the coming week in the Cosmos?
Yeah, so obviously seeing how the Luna UST situation evolves, and I'm hopeful that the Luna community can come together, and interested to see what's going to happen with Luna. I'm pretty sure that UST will repeg, but pretty interested to see what's going to happen with Luna. And yeah, super excited to be done with the Shockwave upgrade and started to work on new things like CosmWasm V1 and IBC contracts and stuff like that.
Must be a huge load off having the work completed on Shockwave.
Yeah, so actually it was the first time that we used the upgrade module. Up until now, we exported and imported. And it was pretty painful every time, and now it was super smooth. Took 9.5 minutes to upgrade. which was pretty nice compared to other times.
Quick question. Do you have a repo that we can do PRs to fix some of the documentation around Cosmovisor? Having now implemented it, we've got a few fixes to those docs.
Yeah, I can post it in just a sec.
Yeah, good. That's cool. We're happy to go through and fix that up, Assaf.
I think that I fixed your comments, but
you've already hit it?
Happy if you can make more PRs and make it better.
Yeah, I might just have another look at it and see if there's any improvements we can make anyway.
To anybody listening, cool people do PRs, cool people fix docs. Be more like Null, fix documentation.
Be more like everyone here. We all hack on documentation in our spare time.
I think that's true. Yeah, as soon as the upgrade finished, the first thing I did is start modifying the documents, make it more accurate. So
maybe it's just we all have a pedantic streak.
I love to be able to make docs that people can just copy paste.
We should do a whole segment on copy pasted docs and whether or not that's a good thing or a bad thing, couldn't we?
I think we've talked about it previously about the copy paste glory. It's the new Gnomes blackboard. It's just copy paste question marks and shit in the middle,
I think every copy paste documentation should have RF/ in it, and just just to see who's awake, just like but hold on a second, I'm not going to do that. One of the most insane things. I'll tell this story and then I think that's pretty much all the time we have. But one of the most insane things I've ever seen on the internet was back in over 10 years ago on IRC. I saw on a chat room somebody looking for tech support. They just logged it. They just started, I think this was pre-Docker. They were running on bare metal. They were trying to redeploy a Ruby on Rails application. They didn't really know what they were doing in terms of running on Linux, and they were having a hard time. And a couple of people have tried to help, and they've been kind of an arse about it. And so the helpful people had kind of gone, okay, you can kind of get on with it. And then essentially a troll had started helping them and just been telling them garbage. And everybody has sort of been like, well, when you're rude to the people trying to help you, whatever, let's just see how this plays out. And then it suddenly escalated where this troll was literally like RMR/ kind of thing. And then the person on IRC who was obviously there, was like, it's asking for my password. What should I do? And we're all like scrabbling for the keyboard, being like, don't do it. And then they just like disconnected from IRC or whatever. And it was like, what the hell happened there? Like, I really want to know what the hell happened there. It's like, was that it? Did they just accidentally trash their laptop? Were they not even SSH'd onto the, what was going on? Like what? But then everybody was just sat around being like, hey, did that guy just like wipe his hard drive or something? I think he said he was on a server. Like, can anybody remember what he said 10 minutes ago? And this troll also then just disconnects as well. And it was like, wow, that was a really weird. It was like the UK Ruby or UK Rails IRC like a long time ago. I was like, wow.
Do you think maybe he was just trolling himself for shits and giggles?
I mean, it might have been a piece of kind of performance comedy via IRC. Yeah. But that would be a lot of effort again to do that whole kind of thing. Do a kind of skip. I mean, if it was very well executed, I believed it. I was bought in. I felt the emotion, and I very much enjoyed it. 10 out of 10. Yeah. Would go and see that Edinburgh Fringe show again.
Or Duma.
To be fair, that would be quite a good. You could do it. You could do like a very avant-garde, like Edinburgh Fringe Comedy Festival thing, where you did the entire show via IRC or something like that. But then nobody would get it because who even knows what IRC is anymore?
Hello, hi, nice to meet you.
Yeah, hi.
Yeah, that's Discord, right? Basically.
Yeah. Oh my god, Discord is basically just like IRC without any of the freedom. So
no, that's Slack.
Usurper.
Since you Slack was IRC for business, which thought of literally 25 years ago, but it's all right. Only missed out a few billion there.
Yeah, but did you make it?
No.
So there you go. Too early.
Yeah, too early.
What's the quote? There's nothing more infuriating than being 10 years too late. except being 1 year too early, something like that.
That's right. Yeah, that's exactly right.
So what is you're most excited about in the Cosmos this coming week, Usurper?
Oh, shit.
Yeah, you come back just in time for the final question.
Come back just in time. Come back to me. Let me give me a second.
Okay, well,
we can't come back to you.
Am I the last one?
Because it's me. So I'm going to go. I'm planning on. Well, we are planning on setting up on a cache in the coming weeks, and we're going to go because we're obviously moving to using like Null has and like King Nodes have. We're moving to remote signers across the board. We're also going to look at moving some of our infra to a cache. So it's going to be pretty exciting. And I think we'll probably do the first one we'll do in that structure will be the Akash validator. So assuming I have time to do it in between stuff, and obviously Prague is next week, which is also very exciting. But I'm more excited about the Akash validator than Prague.
Yeah, that's pretty cool, man.
Maybe I am.
Are you going to attempt the Akash on Akash?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're going to do it. We're going to do it. We're going to do it. We're going to live in glory, or we're going to double sign our way.
Are you going to fork? Sorry, what was that, Assaf?
Is that a thing? Like, can you run like an Akash validator on Akash infrastructure? Oh my god!
Yeah,
I think you can now, as of especially as of the most recent upgrade, where the storage story has got a lot better.
Well, you have been able to do it for a very long time now. It's just that you had to. So the way.
Oh, that was going to be interesting, though.
I know. That's what I was just thinking.
You're back.
He's frozen.
Nope, frozen.
He's frozen again. So Usurper, your time's up.
Oh, I'll go up.
Yeah.
So we're I was just actually rebuilding some infrastructure this week. So we're also moving away from just validator signing nodes. We're going to do a Horcrux based swarm. That swarm is going to be across 3 vendors in the US. So that's going to be on OVH, on AWS, and we have a colo that we run, and that we run a ton of hardware in our own colo. So that's a third node. And so those are all connected. I was doing a lot of work with like WireGuard and some different types of easy management tools of that, like NetMaker and things like that. I actually went away from that, and we're going to use Nebula, which is if you guys have heard of Nebula, it's like a kind of like a peer-to-peer mesh network built by some of the groups at Slack initially, because I think they use that a tremendous amount to be able to do kind of internal routing across a lot of cloud providers. And then now it's being spawned off. I think some of the either engineering team left, or that's a business within a business, or something called Defined. So I'll put links in the show notes around that. It's still pretty early, but man, is it stable. So I had a lot of issues with WireGuard peering. I was trying to do a lot of things where I would drop ports and other types of things to make sure that that swarm would reconnect and everything else, and just kind of struggling with that. But so that'll be on 3 different networks, all 20 milliseconds away. And so I kind of done some testing to be able to say I can have a major outage on AWS or somewhere else and still be able to sign. So once I do that, and I need to build some Ansible structures around that for the signing piece of things, then that allows the nodes to really do anything. And so I think the Akash structure is something, after talking about that, is really, really interesting. We still run a ton of colo. We have a lot of nodes in our colo, but to be able to spread that out a little bit and reduce that need, and then those types of things. So my goal is that away from like something horrible happening in the North American East, away from that there could be a massive vendor outage on any one of 3 or 4 really large, bare metal hosting providers, and not miss a block. That's really my goal. And so anyway, it's just, a lot of testing kind of structure around that, but I'm getting ready to be able to at least move some stuff over and get that going, just to be able to do some testing and things like that. And then hopefully we'll move some of the more important chains over. And yeah, so that's kind of what I'm working on.
Cosmos Omnibus, man, is what I was going to say before. Yeah. But you've been able to use it for validators for a very long time. It's just that you sort of, the way it's set up, you have to put your keys on it.